So guys, confession time, I'm in love with the BYD Seal. So I was able to drive this car last year in China, at the Zhuhai circuit in Shenzhen, and finally, I'm really happy to see this car in Philippine soil. Yes guys, this is proof that BYD can actually make a proper sports sedan. And we're gonna be taking a look ngayon to see what the BYD Seal is all about. So part of the reason why the car looks good is because this car was designed by Wolfgang Egger. So if you're unfamiliar with the dude, he's actually one of the designers of Volkswagen Group. So basically that includes Audi, Porsche, basically the entire Volkswagen Group umbrella. So he was involved in a lot of iconic cars from the German conglomerate. And basically, as you're gonna see in the car's front end, you have your slim LED headlights, which are positioned somewhat higher than the rest of the car's hood. So kind of like the Porsche 911 kung sabihin natin, but it has its own distinct look. So basically, the front end looks very clean. Wala kang masyadong vents all around because again, electric car nga, so this doesn't need a lot of cooling unlike in a gas-powered vehicle. And then, you're gonna see here nice LED DRLs or daytime running lights. And then, just below the headlights, you also have here boomerang-shaped LED lights which looks really good and really distinct. So ngayon naman, let's move towards the side of the BYD Seal because as you're gonna see here, meron ka ditong boomerang-shaped side vent here, or rather a faux vent. And then you're also gonna see here, by the way, an NFC receiver sa kanang side mirror because as you're gonna see here, this is the key fob. This is one of the key fobs pala of the BYD Seal. So you just tap this here, an NFC chip. So yun nga, the car basically locked itself, and then just tap this again if you want to unlock the car. Yan, so the car's unlocked na ngayon. Then here on the side of the BYD Seal, you're gonna see then a very strikingly designed side skirt here. So meron kang mga parang vents here below the rear doors. 19-inch wheels, by the way, on the BYD Seal, which are, by the way, wrapped in Continental Eco Contact 6Q tires. They're actually very grippy tires, and they're really meant for electric car use. Then, typical electric car design, you have here flush door handles. Yeah. Then, as you're gonna move towards the back of the BYD Seal, you're gonna see full with LED taillights, which looks really distinct, very sleek, and really complements the BYD Seal's very sleek looks. Powered tailgate, by the way, in kanyang rear end, in which you're gonna be seeing a very generous trunk. And then speaking of the trunk of the BYD Seal, kung mapapansin nyo nga pala, we're gonna be opening the hood. So BMW style, you pull the lever twice. And syempre electric car, so wala tong engine sa harap. Because as you're gonna see, you actually have a very generous trunk space sa harap ng BYD Seal. Again, electric car, no engine at the front. So that's good for the BYD Seal. Let's close this na ngayon. There. And so that's basically what the BYD Seal has to offer in terms of its exterior looks. So I think that's a good time again for us to hop inside the BYD Seal just to see how nice the interior of this car is. So we're finally here inside the BYD Seal, and as you're gonna see in the interior, it's a very sporty interior with plenty of suede and leather surfaces here on the dash and even the doors of the vehicle. It is indeed a very premium interior, and what I like about the interior of the BYD Seal is you don't have a lot of gloss black plastic here across the interior, and that's a good thing because yun nga, gloss black plastic tends to be really scratchy and really prone to fingerprints, so having not a lot of those in the interior makes this BYD Seal a very nice place to be in. Also, as you're gonna see then here in the center console, you have a lot of storage places under the bridge here in the center console, along with two wireless charging pads just after the gear lever. The gear lever is actually even nice, the electronic gear shifter here. It's like in this sort of crystal housing. Then these seats are very lovely. I love BYD seats, by the way, itong mga one-piece seats sila. In the case of the BYD Seal, it's very sporty. Talagang it's really hugging you in place. And at the same time, despite that sporty orientation, these bucket seats are really nice, really comfortable, and are really well-suited for long drives. In terms of the control layout, it's typical BYD. you have a large digital driver's display along with, of course, a rotating touchscreen. This, of course, has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And in terms of the operating system, well, it is what you will see, of course, in other BYD cars. So, again, the graphics are a bit cartoonish, but there are themes naman to somehow match your preference. And then, as for the functionality of the infotainment, again, just like other BYD cars, it's very functional. Speaking of the multimedia part, what you have here, by the way, in the BYD Seal is a very nice DIN audio or Dyn audio sound system, which sounds really good and even better pa nga than some of the Bose sound systems that you would find in some higher-end Mazdas. Finally, what you're probably gonna ask me here is, kamusta itong kanyang panoramic sunroof because there is no shade? Well, there is a shade, as you've seen in the trunk space siguro kanina, because there's a package at the back of the BYD Seal wherein you can have this parang foldable shade. So yun nga lang, that's your only solution for having a shade sa kanyang sunroof. But in its defense naman, matirik yung araw ngayon dito sa Vermosa, but as you're gonna feel ngayon, or at least sana matras yung kamay ko, hindi siya umiinit. Like, I mean, the glass is warm, but the heat is not entering into the cabin. And that's, of course, the important part naman dito. Of course, as you're gonna see rin, there's no cutout sa kanyang glass roof, so you cannot open this in any shape or form. But yeah, I do wish na there's an option for you to not have the glass roof. Still, it's a minor regret naman for me, and I still really want, sa totoo lang, this BYD Seal so much as a future car. I'm really confessing that I want this as a future car talaga because that's how much I like the BYD Seal. Now, before we head into the driving part, let's talk about na ngayon the rear seats of the BYD Seal. And as you're gonna see here, this is, by the way, set for my driving position. So I'm 5'11", and basically behind this 5'11" driver is another 5'11" adult. So despite the sloping roofline, because you have this large glass roof nga, malaki basically uka na kinarve out niya sa bubong because you have this glass roof. So yeah, this is your headroom. It's actually pretty good. And then in terms of legroom, compared to a Toyota Camry, for example, mas masikip ito. But yun nga, as you can see, this is my legroom, but foot space is really good actually. Though, admittedly, you cannot put your feet under the front seats. But in terms of the foot space, it's actually really good and even better pa nga than a Mazda 6. Yun nga, you're gonna see here a very flat floor because this is a pure electric car. Admittedly din at the same time, yung kanyang floor height is a bit higher than usual for me. So, unless you stretch out a bit, as you're gonna see, you don't actually have a lot of thigh support. But yun nga, it's not too bad naman. It's actually pretty good yung kanyang seats. That's why medyo mataas yung incline ng upuan niya para at least you're gonna be comfortable behind here in the BYD Seal on long drives. Then as for amenities, as you're gonna see here, you have here a cup holder sa kanyang armrest along with your own aircon vents, of course, at this price point lalo. And two USB-C, or rather a USB-A and a USB-C fast charging port. Now, in terms of the actual space, yun nga, there's plenty of space alone for my 5'11" height. But even if you put 3 adults here, it's actually a pretty wide interior compared to some of its competition. So, yeah, it's a really nice space for adults, I think, itong BYD Seal. Yun nga lang, yeah, again, while the glass roof is doing a good job in rejecting heat, I think my bigger problem na ngayon would be the fact na because the sun is really bright ngayon, it's almost 12 p.m. Talagang, like, there's this glare, kung sabihin natin sa point of view ko na ito. So again, that's where the manual shade or the foldable shade comes in to basically block the sun. But yun nga, as for the heat part nga, it's actually doing a good job talaga itong kanyang panoramic glass roof in rejecting the sun's heat. But anyway, having talked about the interior, the practicality, as well as the exterior of the BYD Seal, I think that's finally a good time for us to take this car for a spin. So finally guys, we're taking the BYD Seal out for a drive, and if we're gonna see my past video nga at Zhuhai Circuit with the BYD Seal, you know I was so impressed with the car because nung panahon na yon, that was during torrential rains, and despite the weather, despite the heavy rains at the time when we were doing the shoot, the car was already impressive in terms of the way it performs, in terms of the way it handles the corners, because with all-wheel drive grip nga, you're practically clawing onto the road despite that sheer amount of rain trying to upset the car's handling. Now, here in the Philippines na ngayon na the weather is much nicer today. The weather's sunny, it's very nice. Grabe, I love this thing. I love the BYD Seal in terms of the way it's handling these corners ngayon. So, the steering wheel, usually that's my main gripe with Chinese cars. They're too light and they're too numb. But here in the BYD Seal, they've done a really good job with the handling part of this car. And that's when you know that even BYD can make a proper sports sedan. Granted, in terms of steering feel, it's not the best. Sa totoo lang, it's almost as numb as some of BMW steering sa totoo lang. So, even in that context, hindi nga nalala yung steering feel to with some of BMW's vehicles. But in terms of on-center response, in terms of on-center feel, it's proper steering. It's proper enthusiasts level steering. There's really a lot of precision on-center. I'm wheeling the wheel ngayon on-center and ang ganda nung response niya ngayon. Yet at the same time, it's stable enough na you don't do a lot of steering corrections whenever driving on long straight roads. But how does the rest of the package perform? Ngayon, as a sports sedan, suspension also plays a vital role in making the car handle nicely. And here in the BYD Seal, this car, by the way, comes with FSD, or basically frequency selective damping. And ngayon, it's doing a good job in filtering the bumps on the road. Pero when we push this car through corners, the car's flat. The car's unbelievably flat through the corners. It's composed whenever you hustle this car sa corners ngayon. We have a closed section of Vermosa all for us here. It corners unbelievably well. Yet at the same time, despite that, it's doing such a good job in filtering out the bumps, even if this car is riding on 19-inch low-profile tires. I love the power delivery. So, typical electric car, it's the usual instant torque nga. The torque is delivered instantly. You don't have any gear change to think of or basically any engine to rev. So, it's delivered in an instant. But I like the fact na here in the BYD Seal, meron siyang konting tapering ng kanyang power delivery. So it's not like in the BMW electric cars, talagang it's really gonna give you the entire 100% of the power. But here in the BYD Seal, so I'm gonna put my foot down, may build up siya. Albeit minute, hindi naman parang sa mga gas engine, but there's a build up that I like actually. I like that because it gives a sense of linearity in the way it delivers power. So despite being a performance-oriented EV, there's at least smoothness dialed into the way it delivers its power. But the question now is, what if we put the car in sport mode? So ngayon, the car in sport mode. Ayan, that's kind of like what the BMW EVs feel like kapag yung nag-sport mode na siya. Talagang that's when it delivers 100% power. Pag talagang diniin mo yung pedal, so there's that part na ngayon. But in comfort mode, I like the linearity of its power delivery. So at least it's easy to modulate the throttle pedal even if you're driving this car on the racetrack, for example. And therefore, as a result, you're not necessarily going to upset the car's handling. So, how does braking feel like? Because again, that's also part pa rin of being a nice sports sedan, because what's the point of having a fast car and nice steering and nice handling if the car won't be able to stop in a dime? So, another closed section here for us to test braking performance. That was really good. That's really good braking performance here in the BYD Seal. Despite the car weighing a little bit over 2 tons, again, electric car, so the batteries are really contributing to the car's weight. So, that brings me on that part, yung weight. Yun nga lang, with the car's weight, granted, having all of those batteries placed low in the car does help with the car's center of gravity. Pero, if you push the BYD Seal to its handling limits, that's when you will start feeling the car's weight. It's not something that's unique to the BYD Seal, you have to remember that, because cars like the BMW i4 that I drove a few months ago, remember that car? It has a similar challenge then, because while the car handles great, the batteries can somehow make their presence felt whenever you're reaching the car's handling limits. But then again, that's something that you will only be able to experience whenever you're on track. Here in these roads, whenever you're just gonna have fun na naman in your normal public twisty roads, like sa mga bundok, sa mga bataan, for example, you're not gonna be feeling that. You're not gonna be feeling naman the weight of the batteries for the most part. Again, unless you're really willing to explore the car's handling potential in some of those roads. But overall, body control, suspension control, and even the brakes, this is a truly well-developed sports sedan. This is a really, really nice sports sedan, itong BYD Seal. Refinement's also really good. It's eerily quiet here. It's actually really quiet here, though compared to some of the BYD cars, I do actually hear a bit more tire noise here in the BYD Seal because of the performance orientation of these EV-specific tires. Basically, as an overall package, this has no compromises. This is a nice performance sedan that's high on comfort, high on refinement, high on practicality, in fact. And even in terms of range, because you have more than 500 kilometers of range with this BYD Seal performance version, despite having 530 horsepower on top. It's no wonder that the BYD Seal is making waves in the European market because it's a really good sports sedan, because it's really impressing both European journalists and even European consumers tong BYD Seal. And yeah, it's a really nice car. I'm really in love sa totoo lang. As it is, itong BYD Seal ngayon, it's actually priced at around 2.5 million pesos. If I'm able to drive this car this year, as a full review, it has the potential, in fact, to be Go Flat Out PH's Car of the Year.